By now, 2 weeks after its release, I think everyone who was going to see Wolfman in the theaters will have seen it. So hopefully this will spark a little discussion about Leigh Whannell's attempt at reinterpreting the classic Universal monster. I think a lot was tried in this incarnation of Wolfman. Whether it was successful is a matter of opinion, and here's mine. Wolfman is still in theaters, I believe. I'm sure it'll be out on demand very soon. It's from Universal Pictures. It's directed by Leigh Whannell and written by Leigh Whannell and Corbett. Leigh Whannell follows up his hit interpretation of The Invisible Man with another Universal monster, Wolfman. And the metaphor this time, and the interpretation of the monster itself, is murky. The many forms of masculinity are the clay Whannell plays with in this one. The opening, I guess, is supposed to show an abusive father as young Blake is awoken at the crack of dawn and taken out hunting by his pop, played by Jim Yeager. While this might be taken as abusive by sensitive types, it really simply plays as a stern and strict father who has lost much and is protective of his son, rather than any type of abuse. If having a father who demands to be listened to and reprimands his son for putting himself in danger is abusive, I grew up like Precious, I guess. Cut to 30 years later, and Blake is grown up and played by Christopher Abbott. He's a stay-at-home dad who is manipulated by his daughter, who seems to be a typical kid sometimes and fails to listen to him. Immediately, we're given a similar scenario where the daughter, Ginger, played by Matilda Firth, puts herself in danger and Blake yells at her. Blake then immediately balks and thinks aloud that he told himself he wasn't going to be like his father with the girl. Cut to home, where his wife, Charlotte, played by Julia Garner, comes home from work and doesn't listen to Blake when he asks her to take the business call in the other room. Charlotte argues with him, and the daughter says, "When I grow up, I'm not going to fight in front of my children." These opening 20 minutes set the stage for the metaphors that are delved into for the rest of the movie. Blake is a modern man, staying home while his wife works, a concept that was alien only one generation ago. So immediately, you get the dueling themes of a man trying to navigate a way to be a man in this modern world compared to the standards of the last generation. That concept of what is a male is currently ethereal in today's world and is a fascinating concept delved into by dramas of the 90s like Fight Club, In the Company of Men, and a few other groundbreaking comedies of the 80s like Mr. Mom and Tootsie. Those films dealt with the restructuring of the family and the outcome of that restructuring on what it means to be male. It was smart stuff that really seemed like some filmmakers were trying to come up with a way to explain this societal shift. In Wolfman, this concept runs parallel with the template of pretty much all horror movies where the weak endure and eventually conquer evil. And it all proves to be way too much for Whannell to handle. After Blake is scratched by the creature in the woods, he becomes infected with a virus passed from animal to man, known as Face of the Wolf by the locals. This triggers the story to go down the path of illustrating the escalating cycle of abuse, which was recently dealt with ham-fistedly in Kit Harington's werewolf misfire, The Beast Within. Blake vows to not be like his father, but we never really see any solid abuse, just a paranoid and excitable man struggling to look out for his son by himself. Yes, this can be a form of abuse, but because Blake's metamorphosis into a monster is physical and the threat to his daughter is doubly so, the similarities just don't match up, especially after that first scene where he curbs his temper when it was appropriate to raise his voice to his daughter. But the real murky waters come from later in the film as Blake goes full wolf. Yes, there are moments when he's fighting for his family, and one might say this was a way for Blake to reclaim his role as quote-unquote man of the house. But later, of course, in full-on animal state, Charlotte has to take on Blake, and the evil that is a male influence is vanquished for good. The thing is, Charlotte was already wearing the pants of the family, so this really isn't any kind of metamorphosis for her character. She's not the central character at all, and stays stagnant and strong throughout the film. Why introduce the conflict with Blake between what he was raised as versus what he has learned in modern society, if that concept is tossed by the wayside by the climax of the movie, and instead Charlotte is given the opportunity to be the protector of her family, which is something we've come to expect in most horror movies. Because the theme of the film conflicts with the horror template, Wolfman turned out to be a thematic swamp. Also messy is the werewolf itself. I get it. Most of the creative transformations have been used up back in the 80s with iconic transformations in films like An American Werewolf in London, The Howling, and Company of Wolves. Still, there should have either been some monumentally fresh designs, or I'd even take a callback to the original Lon Chaney Jr. transformation of old with a few modern tweaks. We get neither here. Instead, we get a rather sloppy design, more reminiscent of Cronenberg's The Fly, with a pulpy transformation. Nails peel off, teeth fall out, Blake gets puffy, and though he gets a bit hairier, his hair does fall out and he's practically bald by the final transformation. Yep, you heard me right, a hairless werewolf. Worse yet, the other monster who bit Blake has, I guess, been one for quite some time, so one might think a hairier and more animal-like look would be used, but nope, this monster is just as puffy and shapeless as Blake, who was just transformed. Both look sickly, off-putting, and lack that iconic feel a Universal monster should look like. The Invisible Man's reimagining in his Inviso suit was a solid design, but no such effort was put into the monster here. Wolfman is not a total mess. I did appreciate the attempt to steer the monster's origin away from the gypsy curse and make it more of a virus passed down from animal to man. It makes this hairy creature more akin to Bigfoot and the Dog Man, or the stories of wild feral people in the Appalachian lands.
Graham Lothar of the Hill People!
This modern twist of the disease passed on from one person to the next goes with the theme of abuse being passed from one generation to the next. While being a lover of cryptid lore, I appreciated this modern move away from legend. Still, as a huge fan of the original Universal Wolfman, I do miss the curse, the pentagram, and the creepy gypsies. I know why they moved away from that origin, but still, the quote, "Even a man who is pure at heart and says his prayers at night may become a wolf when the wolf's bane blooms and autumn moon is bright," could have been squeezed in there somewhere. I would have even appreciated it being used ironically, but no dice. While a hint of some kind of local lore is detailed in the opening scrawl of the film, we never really see any of that culture, as all of the action takes place pretty much in one location, Blake's father's house, and in one single night. Initially, when everyone was buzzing about The Invisible Man, Ryan Gosling was attached to this film as the lead. Christopher Abbott, sadly, is no Ryan Gosling. Abbott does fine with the muddled script that he has. He plays the underappreciated homemaker dad decently, but his performance is no real standout. Neither is Julia Garner as Charlotte. Blake and Charlotte have zero chemistry, and while I feel the script doesn't really do the actors any favors to give them a scene to connect, it's hard to see Garner with anyone. She has this asexual nature to pretty much all of her performances. It's not the actress's fault. Not all actresses can be Scarlett Johansson, but as a concerned wife, a protective mother, and simply as someone who is watching her husband falling apart in front of her, Garner left me unconvinced. Wolfman is not as bad as it is just kind of there. There is too much of an attempt to make this a socially relevant movie, and that muddies the story it's trying to tell. There are clear signs that Wolfman was put through the production ringer. Details such as poisonous mushrooms are introduced at the beginning. I thought for sure those would somehow come into play later in the movie, and maybe it did in one incarnation, but the mushrooms never show up again. There might have been a tighter script that really went with the dissection of modern man's role and how that works in a modern society, but I'm sure there was pressure to move back on that concept and simply tell a mainstream monster movie. Being a fan of werewolf movies, I was hoping Whannell would deliver something new to the genre, but in the end, Wolfman felt more like a backwoods version of The Fly. Sorry, I just can't recommend this one. What'd you guys think of Wolfman? Did you go out to the theaters to see it, or are you waiting for it to be available on demand? Let me know down in the comments. Please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're